graphic audio. A movie in your mind.
Graphic Audio presents Dark Horse Comics X, Volume 4. Written by Duane Swiercynzski. Adapted and directed by Eric Messner, with a full cast. An unmasked X lay at the bottom of the ammo pit inside the decrepit and abandoned Arcadia Arsenal. Deathwish leapt down into the pit with him, a small coil of rope with a grappling hook attached to his belt.
Heavy footsteps tells me it's morning.
Deathwish moved over to the prone X and kicked him in the ribs, rocking his entire body. X didn't stir.
Wake up, X. Today's the day.
2 ribs fractured. Another shattered.
Deathwish leaned down and pulled X up.
Tango's not gonna let you die until you deal with me.
X kept his eyes shut and said nothing.
You wanna go on like this forever? Fine with me.
Nothing lasts forever, Deathwish.
Unknown to Deathwish, X's right eye had finally healed.
For instance, I'll bet you thought I'd be blind forever. At first, I thought I was seeing phantom images, hallucinations. Now I'm seeing nothing but red.
The next morning, Deathwish's ritual started again. He leapt down into the pit and stepped toward the unmoving vigilante. Deathwish flipped X over with the tip of his boot.
Come on, get up, Mr. Magoo. You can sleep all you want when you're...
Deathwish looked down at X.
Wait now.
Deathwish crouched down.
You faking?
He threw a savage punch at X's mouth. Blood flew. X remained perfectly still, a corpse.
No. This can't be happening.
He felt for a pulse on X's neck. Nothing. He stood for a moment, unmoving. He took the grappling hook and threw it up out of the pit.
You're not dying yet. I'm not gonna let you.
Deathwish ran through the abandoned Arsenal building looking for something.
Come on! You gotta be one here somewhere.
He kicked open the door and found what he was searching for. A defibrillator kit sat on an old desk in one of the abandoned offices.
Knew it!
Deathwish landed back in the pit, the defibrillator kit under his arm.
Don't go running to the light, X. Don't be getting all cozy with St. Peter.
He knelt down and opened the small case, then quickly reached over and ripped open X's uniform. Deathwish was just about to apply the paddles to X's chest.
I'm bringing your ass back.
X's good eye popped open, a faint sneer on his face.
Hallelujah. It's a miracle.
X lunged and grabbed Deathwish. The defib paddles dropped from his hands.
You lying bastard!
The two wrestled at the bottom of the pit. X reached for the wires from the defib kit.
My strength is still at an all-time low. I have to do this now. I won't get another chance.
X got a hold of the wires and wrapped them around Deathwish's neck. X stood behind Deathwish, pulling the cords tighter, cutting off the large man's air. Deathwish's hands pulled at the cords.
Muscles are already fatigued. Another few seconds and I'll be able to break free.
Deathwish suddenly stopped fighting. Arms dropped to his sides. His whole body relaxed, even as the cords tightened.
Then he stops fighting.
X used the last of his strength to give one final pull of the cords. Deathwish's eyes rolled up in their sockets. X released his grip, and Deathwish's body fell forward.
His entire body goes limp. My muscles are burning, shaking. Then I remember. This is what he wanted. And I've just given it to him.
A tired X looked down at Deathwish.
Bet you're happy now, aren't you, Deathwish?
X stepped forward and ripped open Deathwish's shirt. He turned on the charge for the defibrillator. He pressed the paddles onto Deathwish's heavily tattooed chest. The defib paddles went off. Deathwish's eyes popped open. His entire body contorted for a moment.
Well, we can't have that.
Deathwish lay on the floor, shaken and confused.
Why did you bring me back?
You're not dying yet. I'm not gonna let you.
X moved quickly and grabbed Deathwish's leg before he recovered completely.
I break his left leg. I break his left arm. I break his right leg. I break his right arm.
X leaned against the wall of the pit. Deathwish looked like a broken puppet as he lay on the floor nearby.
I had to pause to regain my strength and to give him time to recover from the shock.
X looked to his left and saw the piece of Deathwish's shirt he tore off earlier. He picked it up and stood.
This ruined garment will have to do for now.
He wrapped the fabric around his head and made a crude mask out of it.
Promises must be kept, even though I do not have the proper vestments.
X hooked a finger into the fabric and ripped out a new eye hole.
That mask ain't gonna help you.
X ignored him as he made his way to the rope and started to climb up out of the pit.
Everybody knows what you look like now. Everybody's gonna come after you.
X continued to climb. He was still weak, and the last few feet on the rope were difficult. He finally pulled himself up out of the pit.
So help me God, I'm gonna find everything that you love, every person you care about, anyone you've ever spoken to or ever looked at, and I'm gonna rip them apart, flesh from bone, relishing every scream and plea for mercy. I'm gonna be the shadow of death that follows you everywhere.
He leaned out over the edge and looked down at Deathwish.
Hey! You have a good one too.
In Carmine Tango's opulent office, the tattered remnants of X's mask hung on the wall like a trophy. The small lock and collar hung open. The material still splattered with X's blood. Carmine Tango, businessman, gangster, sadist, believer, stood behind his desk as Ella, his beautiful, statuesque, cold-eyed, and deadly assistant, entered the room. She glanced through a folder as she approached him.
Word came in this morning. A federal grand jury has been impaneled, and the FBI, DEA, and ATF are working closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Excellent. How many police officers in the crosshairs?
Ella glanced at the file in her hands.
Only 4, Mr. Tango, but it's Daniel Ruidoso and 3 of his colleagues, essentially the heart of the reform movement.
Tango leaned back to admire the mask on his wall, still gloating.
Perfect. We'll be able to move our own men back in place shortly. Spread the word to our associates, Ella. Business as usual.
What about the feds?
Tango smiled smugly.
We have men in place there too.
At dusk, X, in his crude mask, crept along a rooftop on the waterfront.
Tango knew about my place, assuming it's been destroyed by now. But there's a chance his goons didn't find the spare vestments and tools I stashed in the foundation.
He came to the edge of a roof and looked down at his former building. The entire area crawled with federal agents. Crime scene tape was up. Some TV crews were being held off to the right by uniformed cops. There were white vans scattered everywhere, lights flashing. On a large white tarp lay all of X's gear and weaponry.
Looks like Tango did destroy my place after all. With anonymous phone calls to every federal agency with a 3-letter acronym.
He stared at the tarp with his belongings. He could see a spare mask and weapons while crime scene photographers snapped pics of them.
My vestments. This isn't Tango. Only one other person knew about the stash sites, how to disarm the security protocols.
Lee Ferguson sat in the passenger seat of one of the white vans parked near X's old lair. She had a coffee in her hand and looked content. A burly federal agent sat in the driver's seat next to her. Both of them wore bulletproof vests. They calmly watched the operation outside.
Diary of a Federal Informant, Day 11. Still so weird to think that I used to be a general assignment reporter for a real newspaper. But now my readership is a handful of super attentive federal agents, and my beat covers but a single topic: X.
Lee opened the manila folder in her hands and flipped through it.
All I do these days is think about him, and ask myself, what the hell was I thinking?
She stopped flipping through the file and looked at a police-style sketch of X in his mask.
I was his captive for a year. I helped him carry out a series of brutal vigilante murders.
She looked out at X's uniform and weapons spread out on the tarp.
And here's the really sick part. I thought we were the good guys, that we were doing the right thing. Even worse, it took being held prisoner by a gangster to help me realize my tragic mistake. Nice going, Lee Ferguson. Mommy and Daddy would be so proud.
She was jolted out of her reverie by a knock on the window next to her.
Miss Ferguson.
A courier agent stood next to the van. He held up a manila envelope.
From your lawyer. Something for you to sign. Says it's urgent.
She took the envelope and used her finger to open it.
Feeling like I'm on a book tour with everything I've been signing lately. Ow! Hate paper cuts.
She pulled a sheet out of the envelope. Lee and the courier agent looked down at the news clipping in horror.
Oh, shit!
The courier agent held his mic up to his mouth.
Command, get me sack powder on the line.
Lee looked down at the clipping in her hands. It was from a national newspaper and showed her being escorted into a building, surrounded by cops. There was a single red slash through her face. Her cut finger had spread a little of her own blood on the clipping too, near the top where she held it.
X has just issued a new threat.
Ruidoso sat in the District 6 federal prison visiting room in Arcadia and met with his police union lawyer, a somber man in a green suit. A thick pane of glass separated the two of them. They spoke on telephone receivers.
And I told you, unless you can prove it, there's nothing I can...
Listen to me, I'm telling you there is something you can do.
Ruidoso hit the table in front of him, full of fury and brimstone.
My wife's just about got the second mortgage approved. I can post bail. You need to get that moving. And then I can roll up on Tango and drag the truth out of him any way I can.
On the other side of the glass, the lawyer pulled a photo from his briefcase and held it up to Ruidoso.
I've got to say, Danny, the state's evidence is pretty compelling. They've got you meeting with this nutcase. Repeatedly.
The black and white surveillance photo was a glimpse of X and Ruidoso having a conversation outside Ruidoso's house. The photo was clearly taken by someone spying on them from across the street.
Surprised you two didn't break out the dogs and weenies for a little friendly barbecue. And then there's the testimony from the Ferguson girl.
Ruidoso stood up, fight in his eyes.
That's the other thing. I want to talk to her. You absolutely need to make that happen.
Move!
Outside X's warehouse lair, federal agents sprung into action. Guns were out, riot gear was on. They were ready for war. Lee sat alone in the van and watched agents move around outside.
Look at all of this madness. I set this in motion.
She looked scared as agents fanned out around the area.
I could have stopped it all months ago with a single phone call. Or a bullet while he was sleeping.
An explosion on the top corner of a warehouse in the distance drew the agent's attention.
And now lots of innocent people will die. Again.
Seconds later, 3 agents with guns surrounded the van. The agent closest to Lee glanced over his shoulder at her.
Don't worry, miss. He's gonna have to get through us to get to you.
A haunted look washed over her face. She was remembering something.
I don't want to say that I've seen X make his way through a line of cops before.
Her mind flashed back to the time X's tripwires sliced a SWAT team full of dirty cops to ribbons.
It's something I never want to see again.
Lee watched as a group of 5 heavily armored agents approached the burning warehouse.
Now, I've told them practically everything about X, but they still don't understand what they're up against.
One of the agents spun around, seeing something.
Shay, on your 6!
They think they're conducting a typical manhunt for a serial murderer.
The agents opened fire.
But this is no man they're hunting. He's a monster.
In the dark river, unseen by any of the agents as their attention was on the warehouse fire, something stirred.
I don't use the word monster lightly. See, monsters have a unique ability. Call it their superpower, if you will.
X's head rose from the river.
They can come back from the dead.
X crept from the river and stayed low. In the distance, the agents kept their post around Lee in the van, but they all focused on the fire, not the river.
Over and over and over again.
Unnoticed by any of the agents, X reached the tarp where his gear was laid out and grabbed the spare mask. He pulled off his makeshift mask and pulled the spare over his head.
I will not break my vow again.
He quietly locked it in place.
The mask stays on until my mission is complete.
Lee turned from the warehouse fire and looked out the front of the van. The other agents were still distracted by the fire. They didn't see X standing directly in front of the van, staring at her.
I don't blame you, Lee Ferguson. You're doing what any sane person would. But this is not a world for the sane.
Lee looked like she was about to scream. X put a single finger to his lips, then turned and ran off into the smoke. The agents nearby none the wiser. Lee quietly watched him go.
You don't understand the horror I'm feeling right now, do you? Because now I realize you're not threatening me. You're doing something far worse, monster. You're making me your accomplice all over again.
Tango and Ella, flanked by heavily armed goons, stood at the edge to the ammo pit. They watched as Deathwish's hopelessly broken body was pulled up out of it.
Mr. Tango, I heal fast. I can get it back. Just give me a chance.
Stupid suicidal bastard.
Tango had the face of a gravely disappointed father.
One of these days, I will learn to stop making deals with sociopaths.
One of Tango's well-dressed minions ran up to him, cell phone in hand.
Mr. Tango, sorry to bother you, but Woodall's freaking out. Someone's hid our laundry on the west side.
Let me guess. X.
No, sir. Definitely not X. Woodall says there were a lot of them. Looks like a new gang. Someone we've never seen before.
In one of Tango's money laundering houses, the Chosen, machine guns in hand, mowed down a room full of Tango's moneymen. Shredded cash and blood spray filled the air.
These guys move fast, like they were all jacked up on biker crank, wearing masks and costumes and shit.
A Tango man named Woodall, tall man with a military cut, salt and pepper hair, ultra lean and tough, blasted 2 of the Chosen right in their centers of gravity.
Woodall said he personally dropped 2 of them.
A second later, both rose up from the ground like zombies as Woodall reloaded. Woodall was gobsmacked.
But a second later, they just got up like nothing happened.
Woodall dove out a window as gunfire hit the wall all around him.
He also heard them say something like, "You can't escape if you're chosen." Maybe we're the chosen? Anyway, the way he's telling it, it's like that friggin' X found a way to clone himself.
X, back in his regular uniform, moved down a dark alley, guns in hand.
I hear my city screaming. I promise you, my beloved Arcadia, I won't fail you again.
Inside an abandoned police station near the waterfront.
The feds expect me to steer clear of the waterfront, which of course is why I chose this place a few blocks from the dirty river.
There was a dusty duty desk, scattered plastic chairs, and chipped linoleum. Not a soul in sight. But there was one glowing red light from an old-fashioned police radio receiver on the duty desk.
When everybody split in the late 80s, this station became redundant. But in their haste to leave, they left some things behind.
X was already arming himself from the old locker full of rifles and ammo.
Weapons and ammo in a sub-basement nobody bothered clearing.
He pulled a high-powered sniper rifle from the locker.
Earlier generation left them by way of apology. Sorry. Maybe you'll be able to clean up the mess we couldn't.
He slung the sniper rifle over his shoulder. He wasn't fully recovered from his recent ordeal in the pit, and he put his hand out and leaned against a nearby wall for support. He wore a brace on his right leg. He wasn't ready for a fight, but he was ready to do some recon. X sat in some rooftop shadows across the way from what was a once grand 3-story Victorian home that had since fallen to shambles. He peered through the rifle scope, noting the 2 armed guards standing on the porch.
Carmine Tango's drug operation runs vast and deep. This is just one of 7 re-up houses in this district.
A third man appeared around the front of the house. X moved the scope to the right, and there was Gamble on his cell phone.
Why does he have heavy muscle like Gamble babysitting it? Maybe Tango's moving something heavier than pills and horse.
Yo, heads up!
X's one eye widened in surprise.
What the?
Bullets started to rip up the wooden porch. Tango's thugs leapt out of the way.
Someone's making a move on Tango. A rival gang?
X swiveled the scope and scanned the street below.
Come on, show yourselves.
4 men stepped into view. All had blonde hair and stood ramrod straight, automatic weapons in hand. They moved through the street. X clocked their uniforms and body armor. Mostly black with a red line running down the chest. A circle with a sideways V as an insignia.
There you are. Whoever you are.
X shifted the scope to look at a different section of the house. He watched the group's movements.
Well organized. Trained for precision strikes.
He watched as 2 of the new blonde guys, guns in hand, approached a concrete retaining wall on the right side of the house.
Leaving no margin for error.
Gamble crouched down behind a concrete wall, cell phone in hand. To X, it looked like he was frantically keying in a number.
Hang on a sec, boys. Just want to place a quick call to dial a prayer.
Gamble tossed his cell phone over the wall at the 2 gunmen, who reacted in surprise.
What do you know? It's for you!
The cell phone exploded, knocking the 2 gunmen to the ground. Gamble ran and hopped over a fence behind the house.
Leaving your men behind, Gamble. Valiant as always.
This new group had taken out all of Tango's goons and were headed for the front door.
This is my city. These are my targets.
One member of the Aryan-looking team kicked in the front door of the house, with 1 other covering him. They entered, guns drawn.
They have no right to intervene.
X swung his scope back toward the wall where the 2 men Gamble blew up lay. One of the blonde team members stood over them. X pulled a tranquilizer dart from his belt.
But I'm still healing. They have the numbers and the firepower.
He pulled the firing bolt on his rifle back and loaded the trank.
Guess I'll have to settle for cleanup duty.
In Agent Woodrow Hout's office, CCTV footage of the attack on Tango's re-up house played on a small TV. Lee watched the carnage along with the agent. Hout was a portly man, aged 48, with a full head of graying hair. He wore a dark suit and stood with his arms folded. Sunlight blasted through the large windows behind the pair.
What am I watching here?
Lee pointed at one of the men on screen.
And what's up with the perky blondes?
We're thinking they're an Aryan splinter group, inspired by your old colleague, X.
Hout gestured to his crime wall, a bulletin board full of surveillance photos and police sketches, all of the blondes on screen represented. Lee looked from the screen to Hout, skeptical.
Hout, that's insane. Wouldn't ex-groupies be wearing one-eyed masks and stuff?
Look at their deeds, not their dress. These blonde guys have been popping up all over the place, targeting the Carmine Tango organization.
Hout turned to her, a cold gleam in his eye. She could tell that he loved talking tough.
Think about it. Their MO is right out of the X playbook. Namely, cut off Tango's legs and watch him fall on his own balls.
Lee winced and held up her hand.
I get the picture. Wish I didn't, but whatever. But I told you, the real X is still out there.
Hout looked over his crime wall, lost in his own thoughts for a moment.
Yeah, you saw something you thought was X. My gut's telling me he's dead, or at best, a cripple. But his legend? That's another story.
Lee looked at him, pleasantly surprised.
So, then you're done with me? Do I go into witness protection or something? Like, somewhere warm with palm trees and cheap drinks?
Hout shook his head, apologetic. Lee looked crestfallen.
Not yet. We need you to consult on these acolytes and look for a solid connection to X. Put those reporting skills to good use.
Lee turned and stared glumly out the window.
Reporting for the feds. My dream job.
What's that?
Nothing.
Tango, Ella, and the Night Watcher stood on top of another skyscraper under construction. The stars were out, and the still muzzled Night Watcher stared up at them.
Fortune favors the bold, they say. Sure, I could continue to appease Tango with harmless and murky predictions.
Night Watcher pulled his gaze from the sky. Though there were a few stars out, the approaching storm clouds started to obscure them.
Sooner or later, though, I'm gonna guess wrong. And Tango's gonna put out my lights.
Night Watcher turned to Tango and Ella, his eyes bloodshot, his expression sheepish. He seemed like he was gearing up for something.
I'm not as lucky as my old colleague Lee Ferguson. Nobody's going to offer me immunity. So I have to be bold.
Tango looked anxious. Ella, bored.
Well? Because the only way I go free is if Tango goes down.
Night Watcher made his usual pen-on-paper gesture. Tango nodded.
Ella, if you wouldn't mind, dear.
Ella handed him a notepad and pencil. Night Watcher scribbled madly for a bit.
I'm going to oh so subtly urge him to wage war on those psychopaths who have been ripping up Tango's drug houses.
Night Watcher finished writing and handed the notepad and pencil to Tango. The gangster looked down at the page.
When the smile of a dog is revealed, the addled mind is healed.
He looked up from the note with a grin.
Excellent advice.
Night Watcher stared quietly.
Die screaming, you sadistic prick.
Danny Ruidoso stood in the courtyard of the Federal Detention Center in Arcadia. It was late afternoon. He stood apart from the other prisoners engaged in recreation. Nobody wanted to be caught dead talking to a cop. Freeland Kendrick, his fellow inmate, made his way over to him. Kendrick had a black eye.
Hey, Danny.
What's up, Frio? They're not messing with you in the chow line again, are they?
No, something else.
Kendrick looked around for a moment, and then leaned in close to Ruidoso.
You'll never guess who was just sprung from maximum security.
Ooh. Kendrick put his index and middle fingers of both hands up to his head to simulate dog ears.
Woof woof.
The blonde man looked up hazily at X, who had just slapped him.
Wake up. Bet you're wondering how you ended up here, Blue Eyes.
X made a gun with his hand and held it toward the man's temple.
I shot a tranq dart into your head. Your colleagues think you're dead.
X had chained him to the bars of a holding cell inside the old abandoned police station. The blonde's arms and legs were spread out a bit and formed a living X.
No one will be looking for you.
X held up one of his larger blades.
Ever.
He moved in closer with the knife. The defiant blonde didn't flinch.
So go ahead. Scream all you want.
I will tell you nothing, swine!
X smiled sardonically behind his mask.
I'm not asking any questions.
X, slowly and not deeply, glided the blade across the guy's face, making half of his familiar X shape.
I take my time with the blade. Let the pain centers light up one at a time.
Blood gushed from the wound, but the blonde kept a straight face, like he somehow dialed down the pain from within.
But my prisoner barely reacts.
The man tried to lunge at X, but the chains held him. X stood, unmoving.
You hide your face because even God is ashamed of you. Why don't you do your kind a favor and kill yourself?
A puzzled expression formed behind X's mask.
You've got thick skin, Blue Eyes. I'll just have to go deeper.
The Archon has been waiting for you to re-emerge for decades.
The blonde sneered. X moved closer and grabbed him by the hair and held him.
The Archon, huh? Now we're getting somewhere.
He touched the blade to the man's face.
The Archon is coming for you. The Archon will destroy you.
X pondered the man's words as he slowly carved his face.
For decades. Either this Archon has me confused with someone else, or Blondie is still delirious from the tranq juice.
Later that night, Tango's ostentatious white stretch limo cruised down a rain-slicked street in Arcadia. A green van followed the limo at a safe distance. Inside the green van sat Agent Hout and Lee, surrounded by surveillance equipment. Hout wore headphones and sat back in a chair. Lee looked at the monitor, incredulous.
Do not lose that limo.
Can't believe you're using Carmine Tango as bait. You should be arresting him.
They're gonna make a move tonight, I can feel it.
The limo cruised through the streets. The van followed.
And you don't care if people get killed?
Innocent people? Sure.
They watched as a heavily armored SUV blasted out of an alleyway and smashed into the side of the limo, sending it skidding across the road. 6 blonde men in black and gray with the sideways V insignia bounded out of the SUV. Hout fist-pumped the air.
Yes! What did I tell you, Lee? Looks like Mr. Tango's about to have a very bad night.
After the blonde men fired numerous shots into the limo, they stepped forward and opened the door. They pulled a cowering man out from the back and shoved him to the ground. It wasn't Carmine Tango. The men had the night watcher by the shoulder. He was disoriented and struggled against them.
This is what I get, I suppose.
One of the blonde men slammed the night watcher into the trunk of the limo. Another got in his face.
Look at this deviant. Remove that stupid mask at once and tell us where to find Carmine Tango.
These weirdos don't get it. I can't remove my gag.
The night watcher gestured feebly to his gag, and 2 of the blonde men looked at each other. One of them already had a knife in his hand. Behind them, 2 other members of the gang pulled out their knives too.
Defiance from the pervert!
Remove his headgear, quickly.
Fortune may favor the bold, but in this city, they're just ripped apart.
4 of the men started carving up the Night Watcher. They freed him from his bonds, but cut him savagely at the same time. Inside the surveillance van, Lee watched the screen in cold, numb shock.
No.
She turned to the agent.
How? Fucking do something! That guy is innocent!
How about you crawl down out of my butt? We're in observation mode only. Besides, this is bad guy on bad guy crime. I'm not seeing a downside.
In a dark alley nearby, a shadowy group strode toward the limo, just as the bloodied Night Watcher, his face mask now off, slowly tried to crawl away from his attackers.
I did come in handy for one last thing. See, I was a decoy. A way to draw out these Aryan bastards so that they could be thrown to the dogs.
4 of the Dogs of War, Corso, Husky, Terrier, and Dane, dressed in SWAT gear, opened fire on the body-armored blondes.
Tango arranged for their release. Told them these guys were bankrolled by X. All of this inspired by his horoscope.
The blondes returned fire.
Kill for the Archon! Blood for the Archon!
In the middle of the street, the Night Watcher slowly crawled in a pool of his own blood.
Nice to see my words finally having some kind of civic impact.
Inside the surveillance van, Hout was freaking out. Lee squinted at a screen.
Control, who the fuck called in SWAT? Why is Arcadia PD stepping on my dick, huh?
They're no SWAT team, Hout. I recognize them. These guys are convicts.
What? Who are they?
They're disgraced narcotics cops, the so-called Dogs of War. The fact that they're out of the federal pokey means you've got serious problems on...
In the street, one of the Dogs of War heads exploded. His arms flailed for a second as his body dropped.
Corso's head!
There were 2 muzzle flashes from a nearby rooftop. 2 of the blonde gang members flailed and fell as their heads turned into red mist.
Seized explosive rounds. Highly illegal.
X stood on a rooftop, his sniper rifle in hand. He fired again. Another dog, Husky, fell. His head exploded into a wet, messy spray.
Husky!
Another gift from the evidence locker of the past. All it takes is one to the dome, and the dome ceases to exist.
Lee, unafraid, stepped out of the back of the van as she searched for the new shooter.
Please don't be you. Please don't be you.
This is my city. I say who lives or dies.
Lee spotted him on the rooftop. X angrily pumped his rifle in the air, like a knight brandishing a sword.
You tell the Archon I'm waiting.
A Gulfstream G650 glided into the Arcadia International Airport.
Mr. Tango, why would Peter Winter come here, to Arcadia?
Word on the street, Ella, is that Winter's buying up huge parcels of the city for redevelopment.
Inside the terminal, a squad of security cleared a path of TV reporters and celebrity gawkers. A large, chiseled blonde man made his way through the crowd, his face impassive.
Back away, please. At least 12 feet at all times.
No photography.
So, of course, everyone's lining up to kiss his blonde ass.
The Archon. Impossibly tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. He made everyone swoon. The look on his face indicated a disgust to be setting foot in Arcadia. In the crowd, a woman, an aide to Arcadia's mayor, held up a gift bag for the Archon and tried to push her way through his chosen security. He didn't even give her a look.
Mr. Winter, the mayor himself would like you to join him at...
I have a prior engagement.
Step aside, miss.
But I think Winter's here for something else.
One of the Archon's security detail knocked the gift bag out of the aide's hands in an attempt to stop her from lunging at him.
But at least take your gift bag.
There's nothing he needs.
The gift bag spilled open on the carpeted floor of the terminal. An expensive smartphone, a gold watch, a key to the city, and handwritten cards from Arcadian schoolkids emblazoned with "Welcome to our city" spilled on the floor.
Now move!
Carmine, Tango, and Ella lounged on the rooftop deck. Tango lazily swam in the pool, while Ella, clad in a black bikini, busied herself on her tablet.
What makes you say that?
Let's put it this way. When a man snubs the political executive of a city in favor of a meeting with its most powerful underworld executive, he's not here for the real estate.
Ella looked at Tango, stunned.
Peter Winter is having dinner with you?
Tango floated on his back near her, a smug little grin on his face.
With us, my dear Ella. Winter is old European money. He has plenty to spread around. All we need to do is make sure we get our taste. I'm thinking Lobatorio.
Ella tapped furiously on her tablet.
Making the arrangements right now.
X worked out in his new lair, the abandoned police station by the waterfront. He was in the process of doing painful ab crunches, hanging upside down from the ceiling. 2 40-pound dumbbells in his hands, his shirt and mask off.
2 weeks of non-stop training. I'm almost back in prime condition.
He completed the set and dropped the weights.
Ready to resume the war.
He dropped from the ceiling, grabbed a towel, and crossed the room.
But first, I need to drag more intel out of my prisoner.
Minutes later, X, now fully suited up with his mask in place, moved into the holding cell.
Wake up.
X's hostage looked up at him.
I don't require sleep. I am the chosen.
Took this psycho hostage 2 weeks ago.
X's prisoner had a lot of new X-shaped scars all over his body.
So far, intensive questioning has revealed little. He's stubborn. I know he belongs to a sect called the Chosen, and that he works for some freak named the Archon. Beyond that, they're all racists.
He stepped closer to the Chosen member. The blonde man strained against his binds.
The Archon will set your guts ablaze and allow the rats to feast upon them.
X held up a can of little meatball dog food.
You hungry?
Chosen man turned his face away like a bratty toddler.
I would not touch food befouled by your touch.
X thrust a spoonful of the dog food toward the man. He looked at it in disgust, but he was clearly starved and interested in spite of himself.
It's dog food. Not much I can do to ruin it.
The Chosen member leaned down and took a bite. He ate it greedily.
Tell me more about your Archon.
Later, X stood in front of a chalkboard, a remnant from the building's days as a police station. He had written various notes on what he'd learned so far from his chosen prisoner. He stood studying it. The board read, Mark, =, sworn enemy. The Archon, and below that, the name of the small country, Lutzeni, followed by the words, real name with several question marks. Then the words, weapons, tech, and big money.
I learned a little more.
In a different building, Lee Ferguson stood and contemplated the bulletin board before her. It had various notes and photos, and the circle with a sideways V symbol that adorned the body armor of the Chosen.
Almost feels like the old job again. Building a narrative out of scraps of hard fact, fevered conjecture, and outright lies.
She stared at the V symbol, the Archon's trademark.
The question is, am I greater than the material? Or will it bury me?
Lee continued to examine the board.
This is 2 weeks' worth of digging into any references I could find on this mysterious Archon character.
Her mind drifted back to the last time she saw X. He stood on a rooftop and held a sniper rifle.
You tell the Archon I'm waiting.
Lee refocused on the bulletin board.
Anyone who makes X that angry has to be some serious bad news.
Lee, pen in her mouth, puzzled it out, concern on her face.
Miss Ferguson, change of plans.
Special Agent Woodrow Hout entered and crossed the room to her. He looked like he'd been up all night.
If we can find the Archon, maybe we have a shot at taking X alive.
We're done for tonight. Agents Morchi and Summers will take you to the safe house.
Lee turned from the board, concerned.
What's going on? I thought tracking down this Archon guy was our priority.
Hout picked up Lee's jacket from the back of a desk chair.
Capturing X remains our priority.
Except for tonight? Seriously, Hout, what the hell?
Come on, let's go.
Hout held out Lee's jacket and bag, but she crossed her arms.
No! I've been slaving away in this hot, cramped office of yours for 2 weeks. Level with me or I walk.
Come on, Lee. Why are you breaking my stones?
Lee glared at him.
Fine. Carmine Tango has a celebrity dinner guest tonight. I want to know why.
The restaurant, L'Obitorio, was a swank, old-school Italian restaurant on the ground floor of a downtown skyscraper. 4 bodyguards, 2 were Tangos, and 2 were members of the Chosen, stood outside. The swank Italian restaurant had old-school crushed velvet walls, Chianti bottles that doubled as candle holders. It was the kind of place Tango loved. Tango stood up at his table with Ella beside him. The Archon, flanked by more Chosen, approached. More of Tango's goons lingered nearby.
Mr. Winter, Peter, so glad you can make time for me.
I brought wine. Let's begin.
The Archon sat across from Tango and Ella. A nearby servant opened a bottle. Tango and the Archon raised their glasses. Tango grinned like a love-struck boy. The Archon remained stern. Tango glanced at the bottle of wine.
Is this the 09 Chateau Margaux? Only 3 of these were produced.
6. Only 3 were for public sale at $195,000 each. The first 3 were presented to me by the vineyard.
Tango sipped the wine and turned to Ella.
You really should try this. It's exquisite.
No, Mr. Tango. Thank you.
A huge porterhouse steak was placed in front of the Archon, who looked at it like it was a Big Mac and fries.
Now this, you're going to love this. Giordi uses a private dry rub that is phenomenal.
Tango leaned over with his fork. He looked at the Archon, an eyebrow raised.
You don't mind if I take a little taste, do you?
The Archon's face held an ice-cold fury at the idea that Tango would even come near his food.
Remove your utensils from my plate.
Tango leaned forward, a sneer on his face, fork still in hand. He wasn't insulted. He loved the idea of dishing it out to the so-called powerful.
Hey, you don't waltz into my town without a willingness to share, my friend. Maybe we should skip the food and turn to the business at hand.
The Archon stood quickly, his knife in hand. Tango was surprised. Ella, meanwhile, sat and looked on uncomfortably.
I'm not here to do business, you unrefined ethnic goon. I could have filled that wine bottle with diseased pig urine and you wouldn't know the difference.
Tango recovered and calmly turned to Ella, his trusted ally. Ella didn't make eye contact.
Ella, will you please shoot this gentleman in a place that will guarantee he'll have no heirs?
Ella looked down at the table.
I'm sorry, Mr. Tango.
She stood slowly.
The lovely Ella and I have spoken privately, and she's come to understand a few things. Namely, her kind is the future. You're the refuse of the inbred past.
Tango looked furious.
Fellas, paint the walls with these 2 fools. Winter and the traitor.
The Chosen, behind the Archon, drew their guns. Coolly, calmly, like they did it daily. Tango's goons pulled their guns. Fury and bloodlust on their faces. Tango suddenly looked sickly.
Oh, what did you...
He swayed slightly and grabbed the table. Guns were now drawn on both sides. Ella slowly moved over to the Archon's side. Tango, now laid on the tabletop, blood gushing from his mouth.
Ella, tell your ex-colleagues to place their weapons on the floor or Carmine here will surely expire.
Do what he says.
In Haut's surveillance van down the street, Lee and Agent Haut stared at the monitor. Haut had a look of disappointment as they watched the security camera feed from the restaurant.
Damn it. A truly decent man like Peter Winter comes to town, and Tango has to screw it up.
Peter Winter was one of the aliases for the Archon. Lee studied the screen.
Hang on. Can you push in on Winter?
Haut zoomed and leaned towards the monitor.
His face.
What about it?
The screen filled with the Archon's face. A smile formed slowly as he watched Tango struggle.
He's enjoying this. You think he might be connected to whatever's been going on this last week?
You're out of your mind, Lee. That man is going to be canonized when he passes, which might be tonight if Tango has his way.
Inside the restaurant, Tango struggled. He wiped his bloody mouth with a shirt sleeve. His face was ghostly white.
What's the matter, Paisan? Can't you handle your liquor?
You bastard.
The Archon smiled broadly. Behind him, his team of Chosen chuckled. Ella stepped away from the Archon, conflicted about what she witnessed.
Please stop this. You said it would be painless.
Tango struggled and slowly pushed himself up from the table.
Can't be the wine. I'll drink from the same bottle.
Tango slid off the table and hit the floor. The Archon looked on smugly.
Well, I suppose inferior races can't handle the complexities of this vintage.
Archon slowly crossed around the table and stood over Tango.
I do possess an antidote. In exchange, you will tell me everything about the vigilante known as X. I am told you know a great deal.
Tango realized he was done for. His eyes bulged and he clutched at his throat. Tango nodded and gestured with his hands, a desperate signal to give Archon whatever he wanted. A member of the Chosen stepped over and cruelly stabbed an EpiPen-style device into Tango's chest. Tango sputtered back to life. He sat up, the EpiPen-type device still sticking out of his chest.
Okay. I'll give you everything.
Disgusted, the Archon turned his back on Tango, the ultimate insult, and Tango knew it.
Deliver the intelligence to my associates.
Inside the surveillance van, Haut watched the screen, stunned.
Control, get me an emergency response team down here stat. We've got a rapidly devolving
Lee, who looked out of a small side van window, grabbed Haut's arm in fear.
Oh my god, it's X!
X swung from a small cable towards the front window of the restaurant. Both the Chosen and the two Tango goons opened fire on him. X smashed through the front windows of the restaurant. He landed on his feet, ready to kick ass, shattered glass all over the floor, his sword in hand.
You started dinner without me.
The sound of guns racking filled the room. Tango, on the floor, reached out to X.
Get out of here, you stupid son of a bitch, while you still can!
The Archon smiled as he stepped in front of the Chosen and waved them down. They lowered their weapons.
I thought you might still live. Lice are notoriously difficult to eradicate. Still, I appreciate that you saved me the trouble of locating you. Of course, I saw through your pathetic ragtag disguise.
X pointed his sword at the Archon.
This is your second and final warning, Blondie. Leave my city, never to return.
Your city? Who are you fooling? Your city is nothing but embers and the rapidly fading memories of an Eastern European ghetto, soon to be lost forever once the last wretched synapse burns itself out.
X cocked his head slightly, confused.
You know you're in America, not Europe, right, pal?
Remove that stupid mask and let me see your face one last time.
The mask stays on until my mission is complete.
The Archon raised an eyebrow.
And what is your mission?
You.
X hurled 2 concussive flashbang grenades to each side to disorient the Chosen while he went for the Archon. Smoke filled the room. X saw the Archon take a purposeful step forward through the smoke at the flashbangs. Behind him, both the Chosen and Tango's goons held their ears.
I'll give him this. The big guy moves like he doesn't give a damn.
X pulled a double-barreled shotgun from beneath his cape.
But stoicism is no defense against 2 Magnum 12-gauge shells.
X squeezed the trigger. The shirt on the Archon's chest shredded as he stumbled slightly.
Thought you would have learned by now.
X quickly loaded 2 more shells into the shotgun. The Archon quickly composed himself, and when he stood up straight, X saw that he took surprisingly little damage.
How is this possible? Whatever armor he's wearing, it's already been compromised. This will end him.
X raised the shotgun to hip level, but before he could pull the trigger, the Archon covered the distance between them. He swiftly grabbed X by the throat. The shotgun flew from his hands.
His grip is iron, unyielding. Chokes the air right out of me.
The Archon slammed X down into the tile floor. Cracked, tiny black and white tiles flew everywhere. The impact was so hard, it dug into the cement beneath.
The impact leaves me senseless.
The Archon picked X up as the vigilante tried to pry open his grip. The Archon looked bored.
Is this honestly your best effort?
It's taking all of my effort to stay conscious.
X hammered his fists into the Archon's sides.
His ribs are like iron bars.
The Archon squeezed X's neck tighter.
Fingers like braided steel.
X looked at the Archon's face as everything started to gray out. The next thing he knew, the Archon was slapping him awake.
Oh, enough of this act. You can withstand much more than this.
X woke up, choking. The Archon stepped to the side and plucked a steak knife from the floor. The steak knife looked tiny in his considerably large hand. He looked at the knife for a moment, then to X.
I want to see your face when you die.
The Archon quickly slashed the blade across X's face, ripping open his mask and flesh right to the bone, creating X's own telltale mark.
I want to look into your eyes as the lights go out.
X struggled against the grip of the Archon.
Nobody takes off my mask!
Then stop me.
I had my mask removed by force not too long ago. I refused to let it happen again, which is why I installed a little safeguard in the collar.
Come on, let's see what kind of man you are.
The Archon stared down at X, a taunting look on his face. X's finger moved to a switch on his mask's collar.
A little bit of chemical discouragement for the next son of a bitch who gets in my face.
A small amount of liquid squirted out of a tiny nozzle in the collar. It hit the Archon in the face.
Sulfuric acid.
The device burned one slash of an X from the Archon's jaw up through his right eye. He recoiled in pain and let go of X. Outside the restaurant, an FBI strike team quickly approached the building. Hout and Lee looked on from the surveillance van.
The strike team has every exit blocked.
Another pack of agents in riot gear swarmed the rear of the restaurant.
Nothing's coming out of that restaurant unless it's dead or in handcuffs.
Lee was unimpressed.
Can I give you some advice, Agent Hout?
As long as it'll assist this op.
I've seen X escape from a lot of so-called impossible situations. Corner him and you'll get a lot of innocent people killed.
Hout looked at her, incredulous.
That's your advice? Just let him go? No way. Tonight, we close the book on this psycho.
Back inside the restaurant, X jumped to his feet while the Archon gingerly touched his freshly scarred face. He didn't seem particularly worried. His chosen looked to him for instruction.
Heard him.
The Archon's men trained their weapons on X as he ran toward the kitchen doors.
Allow me.
Ella stepped confidently in front of the kitchen doors, blocking X's path. Carmine Tango lay on the ground near them.
I have intimate knowledge of his weak spots.
X stopped just as Ella threw a kick into his face. His head snapped back. He recovered and saw the confident look on the woman's face. Tango lay near them, his arms out towards them.
I saw how easily you were beaten last time.
Don't let me die like this.
You were so weak.
Ella threw another savage kick at X. He caught her leg midair.
I got better.
He grabbed her leg and hurled her into the Archon's men. Tango reached for X, desperate.
Please, you and me got history.
X looked down at him.
We do.
X place-kicked Tango in the balls, which sent him sliding across the tile floor. And straight into the swinging kitchen doors. X watched the gangster slide into the kitchen and started after him. The Archon's men recovered and opened fire. Behind the Chosen, the Archon watched, almost bored.
Nothing vital, please.
As X ran, he pulled 2 handguns from his belt.
Let's see if his men are wearing the same kind of armor as their boss.
As he got to the kitchen doors, he leapt, swung around in midair, and fired. 4 of the Archon's men writhed and twisted as they were struck.
Nope.
Ah, hell! We got gunfire! Get in there!
Hout yelled into a headset, his eyes glued to his laptop. Lee slipped out of the back of the van and hurried down the block, trying to get away from the action.
This is insane. So fucking insane.
The strike team moved in formation toward the front of the restaurant.
Move, move, move!
Inside the restaurant, through split Venetian blinds, one of the Archon's Chosen peered outside at the street.
Mr. Winter, we have a federal presence rapidly approaching.
He turned to look at the Archon, who dabbed the edge of a fabric napkin into a tumbler of water and then dabbed the napkin to his face. Nearby, other members of the Chosen attended to their fallen friends.
Summon the Attorney General and the appropriate adjuncts immediately.
Sir, they're just a few steps away.
Tell them full erasure protocol. A hood like Carmine Tango no doubt attracts all manner of unsavory attention.
The Archon walked slowly across the restaurant. As he walked, he removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. After the Archon's order, 3 of the Chosen members had their cell phones to their heads, guns still in their hands.
There can be no trace of my presence here.
Full erasure protocol.
Full erasure protocol.
Well, then you'd better wake him up, Sharon.
Outside, the strike team had a battering ram and prepared to take down the front door.
Then clear the building and establish a perimeter. I want to be alone with the man in the mask.
But sir...
I said everyone.
In the kitchen, X picked Tango up by his shirt collar. Tango still reeled from both his poisoning and the recent assault on his genitals.
Who is this Peter Winter guy to you?
I should ask you the same question.
You were dining together, Tango. You're not strangers.
Tango's face took on a gloating smile, despite the pain. He loved that someone was causing X grief.
He's a crazy rich guy with a hard-on for you. Even more than me.
X got in Tango's face.
Why me?
No idea. Why don't you go ask him?
X dropped Tango back to the floor.
He just used me as bait to get to you.
X walked away from Tango towards a corner of the kitchen. Tango crawled after him.
What are you? What are you doing? You actually running away?
X walked up to a large box he had delivered, while disguised, to the kitchen a day earlier. He grabbed a nearby kitchen knife and slid open the top of the box.
Didn't take you for a coward, X.
X reached into the box and moved aside the packing peanuts.
Yeah, I'm a coward. A coward with a really big gun.
He pulled his AA-12 shotgun out of the box. Outside the restaurant, the strike team calmly walked away from the front of the building. Finally out of the van, an incredulous Hout approached the team leader.
What the hell is going on?
No orders. We all go home.
You out of your frickin' mind? On whose authority?
The strike team leader handed Hout his cell phone.
His.
Hout held the phone to his ear. His eyes bugged when he heard the voice. He couldn't believe who was on the other end of the line.
Yes, sir. I understand, sir. Of course, sir. Yeah.
Dazed Hout handed the phone back to the strike team leader, who had a sarcastic look on his face.
Jesus. That was the attorney general.
You think?
The rest of the strike team walked away, and behind them, Tango's goons and Chosen members walked in an orderly fashion out of the front of the restaurant, some carrying their dead colleagues. It looked as if this was a baseball game that was called on account of rain.
We're alone now.
The Archon stood alone in the restaurant, the acid burn on his face already faded, as if nothing happened. He slowly strolled through the restaurant.
Maybe you've become accustomed to hiding your real strength all these years. You don't have to hide your wretched face from me.
The Archon swung a fist and knocked aside a huge dining table, meant for 8 people, as if it were made of foam.
Show yourself!
In the kitchen, X dragged Tango across the floor. Tango had a genuinely worried look on his face.
He sounds pissed.
Turn yourself into the police. They have to give you medical treatment. I don't.
X pulled Tango up and quietly opened the back door so that Tango could stagger outside. Both turned back in the direction of the thundering noise at the other end of the room.
Oh, God.
The Archon smashed through a solid brick wall in a vulgar display of his strength and superiority. Broken bricks and paneling lay at his feet. He was covered in brick dust, but otherwise looked none the worse for wear.
No more hiding. No more holding back. After all these wasted years, it ends tonight.
X shoved Tango out the back door. Tango limped quickly down the alley.
I thought you were crazy before. Now I really know.
You're mine to kill, Tango. No one else.
X turned his attention back to the Archon, who took a step towards him.
I shouldn't be surprised you allied yourself with an ethnic clown in this gutter of a city.
I already gave you one warning. This is your second and final.
X held up the AA-12 and aimed it.
The Auto Assault 12 can blast through any armor. This roid-raging lunatic's Kevlar-reinforced suit will shred like tissue paper.
X's gloved finger began to pull the trigger. The Archon suddenly cleared the distance between them at an impossible speed, his movements nearly a blur. X's eye widened in surprise.
But then, before I can pull the trigger...
The Archon smacked the AA-12 out of his hands. The gun skittered across the room.
I've never seen a human being move that quickly.
X pulled a sharp, stubby blade from his belt as he grappled with the Archon.
I try to use his proximity to my advantage.
X tried to shiv the Archon.
Let a bleeding gut wound slow this big boy down.
The Archon caught the blade with his bare hand.
You continue to rely on weapons.
The Archon's massive hand snapped the blade in half.
Why are you hiding your strength from me?
The Archon headbutted X, and the Vigilante reeled.
Instead, he uses the close proximity to his advantage.
The Archon deflected a punch from X while landing one square in his mouth.
The next minute is an orgy of punishment that I do not fully remember.
The Archon grabbed and nearly effortlessly snapped X's left arm in half. Bone popped out of the skin.
Just fragments, like the climax of a nightmare.
X backed away and tried to throw a knee up into the Archon's face. The Archon blocked it with the edge of his hand as if it were nothing.
Every defensive move I make, he either deflects
The Archon launched a fist deep into X's stomach, which hoisted him off the ground and threw him across the room.
Or anticipates way ahead of time.
A broken X scrambled across the tile floor. He made his way to a stack of boxes in the back of the kitchen. The Archon watched him crawl, a perturbed look on his face.
Is it possible you're not holding back? Could I have been misled?
I have only one play. Just one final safeguard left. A remote trigger.
X reached a stack of cardboard boxes and stopped.
And enough C4 to liquefy this entire block. Courtesy of the Arcadia Police Department.
He pulled the small remote detonator off a box, his thumb poised over the button. He turned back toward the Archon.
You should have never set foot in my city.
X held up the detonator.
Here's your express flight home.
Again, the Archon cleared the space between them so fast, he became a blur.
I'm fine with death if it takes this monster off the board.
The Archon wrapped his meaty paw around X's hand and snapped his thumb as well as the detonator. And the Archon didn't stop. He crushed X's hand, the fingers spreading in every direction but the usual ones.
Instead, he removes my final piece.
The Archon stood and looked down, disappointment on his face.
I have made a mistake. You're not him.
X's face twisted in a rictus of sheer agony.
Who? Actually, I don't care. Fuck you.
The Archon stared with a look of complete disinterest.
I wasted my time on a nobody.
X glared up at him, his mask in shreds, but still on. He slowly got to his feet.
I'm gonna find a bigger gun, a bigger bomb, and I'm gonna...
The Archon kicked him through the back wall.
You're boring me.
Minutes later, outside the restaurant, the Archon walked away, flanked by the Chosen.
I want wheels up in 20 minutes.
One of the Chosen jerked a thumb in the direction of the restaurant.
What about the freak in the mask?
He is beneath our concern.
A badly injured X staggered slowly down an alley, his arm broken, hand pulverized, most of his mask still on. He dragged his hand along a wall, desperate to stay upright and make it back to his lair. He suddenly fell to his knees. And puked blood through the shreds of his mask. He wiped the excess vomit from his mouth.
Hey.
He looked up toward the voice, trembling, vomit still dripping from his mouth. He knew that voice.
You were working for the feds. You told them I was a monster. You told them I held you captive. You excavated my past. You wanted me killed.
Lee Ferguson twisted her face in doubt.
I admit it. I'm more than a little confused right now. Because everything you say is true.
X lowered his head to spit. Lee moved slowly closer to him and extended her hand. He looked up at her.
But I just can't leave you to die.
Dark Horse Comics, X, Volume 4, written by Duane Swiercynzski and Eric Nguyen. Dark Horse Comics, X, Volume 4 is a graphic audio production. X, copyright 2021 Dark Horse Comics, LLC. Copyright 2014 Duane Swiercynzski and Eric Nguyen. All rights reserved. Recorded with the permission of Dark Horse Comics, LLC. Copyright 2022 Graphic Audio, LLC. All rights reserved. Narrated by Eric Messner. with performances by Rainer Gabriel as X, Natalie Van Sistine as Lee Ferguson, Andrew James Spooner as the Accountant, Stephen Carpenter as Lieutenant Setter, Gabriel Michael as Carmine Tango, Ryan Carlo DeLusung as Officer Danny Ruidoso, Stephanie Nemeth Parker as Ella, James Lewis as Deathwish, Peter Holdway as the Archon, James Konachek as the Night Watcher, and Earl Fisher as Agent Hout. Also with Anthony Palmini, Bradley Foster Smith, Darius Johnson, David Engel, David Kwee, Evan Casey, James J. Johnson, Gene Rosalino, John Vertullo, Keith Richards, Ken Jackson, Keval Shaw, Matthew Bassett, Matthew Pauly, Michael John Casey, Nanette Savard, Nicolette Kong, Nicole Perez, Nora Ashrati, Patrick Boylan, Richard Rowan, Rob McFadden, Sam Intrater, Scott McCormick, Sean K. Jane, Sherry Wishard, Shrevin Amin, Torian Brackett, Tree Taylor, and Yasmin Toison. Adapted for graphic audio and directed by Eric Messner. Graphic audio dialogue editing and sound design by Robert McDonald, Michael Hanusiak, and Grayson Holland. Produced by Rick Rowan, Duane Beeman, and Matt Webb. Executive producer, Angie Cornett. If you enjoyed Dark Horse Comics X, you might also enjoy Dark Horse Comics The Mask and Dark Horse Comics Ghost. These titles and many more are available in graphic audio. Keep listening for a preview of another exciting title in graphic audio.
You shouldn't have stolen from me, Alex. You have no idea the problems you've caused. I'm afraid this cannot stand. Any last words? I'm sorry you feel that way, Alex. Now you go to hell!
Now, without further ado...
A woman is floating a few feet off the ground. Her white gown billows around her. She's spectral, translucent. Her eyes bore into us, and her features are contorted with a mixture of pain and pure rage that cuts me like a knife.
Oh my god, oh my effing god! Tell me you got that!
I got that.
Holy crap, man! Holy crap!
Keep your voice down.
Or what? We'll wake the dead? We already did that! You saw it!
I don't know what I saw.
You saw a ghost, man! You saw a mother-loving ghost!
I don't know who I am, where I came from, or if I truly am here at all. I was born to this world fully formed, in my own armor, and prepared for war. If I only knew who my enemy was, I'd be golden.
What the hell? What do you want?
Fun! I'm so sorry, bro!
Your boy bought an item from an intermediary that was not authorized for sale by our employer. On your knees. You too, sister. What's with the white? What are you supposed to be?
Oh my god! Oh, holy sh...
Move! Over by your boyfriend. Now!
Don't touch her.
Or what, big man? What the...
I don't know what I expected her to do, but I did not expect her to rip the man's heart out.
I will know who I am, where I came from, and what became of me. I will know who did this to me, and I will bring hell down upon them.
Come and get it!
I will kill you for this.
You already did. You want this box? Take it!
You're saying There are 32 demons hiding in the city of Chicago?
We don't know what they are.
We have to call them something.
Yeah, but...
Demon works.
So what are we going to do?
What we have to do, Tommy. We're going to find them.
From Dark Horse Comics, Ghost, Volume 1, In the Smoke and Din, by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Phil Noto. Graphic audio, a movie in your mind.
Thanks for listening to this graphic audio production. Graphic Audio has over 1,500 titles to choose from. Listen to over 150 binge-worthy series, from sci-fi to fantasy, to graphic novels, to mystery thrillers, to action-adventure, to westerns, and more. Check out our exclusive titles available only in our dramatized adaptation format. If you'd like to listen to an entire series, you can conveniently purchase a download series set at graphicaudio.net. You can also earn loyalty reward points, redeemable towards future online purchases. Stream audiobooks immediately or download them to listen offline on your mobile phone or tablet using our Graphic Audio Access app, which is available on all Android and Apple devices. We like being radically different when it comes to our audiobook productions. Listen to A Movie in Your Mind, on the go, anytime, anywhere. Sign up for our email newsletter for the latest updates and new releases. Like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Visit our web store today at graphicaudio.net.